Because of message limits, I will deliver it scene by scene, beginning now with scene 1, almost equals 1,000 words. The remaining scenes will follow immediately after in the next responses without changing style or tone. The mansion glowed like a palace carved from light. Every crystal chandelier dripping gold across marble floors polished so perfectly they reflected the guests like mirrors. Classical music drifted through the air, soft enough to suggest elegance, but loud enough to remind everyone that this was not an ordinary family gathering. It was a display of wealth, power, and status. Guests arrived in tailored suits and designer gowns, laughter chiming like fine glass as champagne flowed freely. Servants moved with rehearsed precision, trays balanced effortlessly, eyes lowered in practiced respect. Near the grand staircase stood Elena. She wore a simple maternity dress in soft ivory, elegant in its own quiet way, but painfully modest compared to the extravagance surrounding her. One hand rested protectively on her swollen belly, fingers tracing small circles as if grounding herself. Her smile was gentle, reserved, practiced, the kind of smile worn by someone who had learned not to expect kindness in rooms like this. Despite being the lawful wife, she felt invisible, like a guest in someone else's life. Across the room, Veronica laughed loudly. Her laughter was sharp, deliberate, designed to be heard. She leaned against the arm of Elena's husband, Adrian, her manicured fingers gripping his sleeve possessively. Veronica's red dress clung to her like fire, every detail screaming confidence and entitlement. She moved through the room as if she owned it, greeting guests with exaggerated warmth, soaking in their attention. Many assumed she was the lady of the house. She never corrected them. Adrian said nothing. He stood stiffly beside Veronica, his eyes flicking nervously toward Elena and then away again. Guilt flickered across his face like a passing shadow, quickly buried beneath cowardice. He adjusted his cufflinks, nodded at business associates, and allowed the illusion to continue. Silence, after all, was easier than truth. Veronica noticed Elena watching that a slow smile curved her lips, calculating and cruel. She excused herself from the group with a light squeeze of Adrian's arm and walked toward Elena, heels clicking sharply against the marble. Conversations nearby softened as people sensed tension approaching, curiosity sharpening their ears. "Well," Veronica said brightly, her eyes flicking to Elena's belly before drifting down her dress. "I see you decided to attend after all." Elena inclined her head politely. "It is a family event." Veronica laughed, tilting her head as if amused by a child's misunderstanding. "Family," she repeated, savoring the word. "That's an interesting way to put it." A few guests lingered closer, pretending to admire paintings while openly listening. Veronica circled Elena slowly, her gaze openly critical. "I must say," she continued, voice sweet but edged with poison, "ivory is brave. Though perhaps something with more structure would have been better. It does nothing for your figure." Elena's fingers tightened slightly against her belly. "I'm comfortable." "Comfortable," Veronica echoed. "Oh, darling, comfort is a luxury. One usually earns it." A few people chuckled nervously. Veronica leaned in, lowering her voice just enough to sound intimate while still being heard. "You know, people are talking. They wonder why someone like you is here at all, wearing something so modest, standing so quietly, almost as if you don't belong." Elena's cheeks warmed, but her voice remained steady. "I belong where my husband belongs." Veronica's smile sharpened. "Do you?" She glanced meaningfully toward Adrian, who stared into his drink, pretending not to hear. "Because from where I'm standing, it seems quite clear who stands by his side." Veronica turned to the nearest guests. "Don't you think so?" she asked lightly. After all, appearances matter. The silence that followed was heavy. Elena felt the weight of every gaze pressing into her, stripping her bare of dignity. For a moment, she wanted to disappear, to retreat into herself and protect her child from the cruelty in the air. But instead, she straightened her back. "I'm happy for you," Elena said quietly. "Truly." Veronica blinked, surprised. "Happy," she scoffed. "How generous of you." Her voice rose, confidence swelling with the attention. "Let's be honest, Elena. You were never suited for this world. You married into it, yes, but you never learned how to shine. This house, this life, this power," she spread her arms grandly. "It was always meant for someone like me." A murmur rippled through the room. Veronica stepped closer, lowering her voice again, this time dripping with satisfaction. And when the baby arrives, she whispered, things will finally be put in order. Elena inhaled slowly, fighting the sting behind her eyes. Before she could respond, the deep sound of footsteps echoed from the entrance hall. Heavy, measured, commanding. The room shifted instinctively. Conversation stopped. Glasses lowered. Heads turned as an older man entered, his presence alone enough to straighten spines and silence whispers. His silver hair was neatly combed, his tailored suit understated but unmistakably expensive. His eyes, sharp, observant, swept across the room, missing nothing. The father-in-law had arrived, and with him came a sense of reckoning. Elena felt something change in the air, like the quiet before a storm. That Veronica's confident smile faltered for just a second. The man paused at the top of the steps, surveying the gathering. Then his gaze landed on Elena. It softened instantly. He walked toward her, ignoring everyone else. And the truth, long buried beneath lies and arrogance, was about to surface. The father-in-law moved through the room with calm authority, each step deliberate, as if the marble floors themselves recognized his weight. Conversations didn't just quiet, they vanished. Even the music seemed to fade into the background, its elegance no longer commanding attention. All eyes followed him, some with admiration, others with unease. He stopped in front of Elena, his expression softening further as he took in her pale face and the protective way she cradled her belly. "My child," he said gently, placing a hand over hers. "You look tired." Elena swallowed, her composure wavering for the first time that night. "It's nothing," she replied quietly. "I didn't expect you to come." "I wouldn't miss this," he said, his gaze lifting slowly, intentionally, until it met Veronica's. The warmth vanished from his face, replaced by something cold and assessing. Veronica recovered quickly, straightening her shoulders and offering a dazzling smile. "Father," she said sweetly, stepping forward as if she belonged there. "We were just enjoying the evening." He did not return her smile. "Were you?" he asked, his voice even, but edged with steel. From where I was standing, it looked more like a performance. A nervous laugh rippled through the guests. Adrian finally looked up. "Father," he said, forcing confidence into his voice. "You're early." "Am I?" The older man replied, glancing at his watch. "I find that truth is never early, only delayed." The words landed like a warning. Veronica tilted her head, feigning innocence. "I hope nothing is wrong." He studied her closely, then turned back to Elena. "Have you eaten?" Elena shook her head. "Sit," he instructed softly, guiding her to a nearby chair as if the entire room belonged to her. A servant rushed forward immediately with water and a plate, trembling slightly as they obeyed. Veronica's smile tightened. "This is a family event," she said carefully. "We should all feel welcome." "Yes," the father-in-law agreed. "Family should feel safe." He turned toward the guests, his voice rising just enough to command attention. "Forgive me for interrupting your celebration," he said, but I sensed tension. No one spoke. Veronica crossed her arms lightly. "I'm sure it's just misunderstandings." "Misunderstandings thrive in silence," he replied, "which is why I dislike them." His eyes returned to Elena. "Would you like to tell me what happened?" Elena hesitated. Every instinct told her to stay quiet, to endure. But something in his gaze, steady, protective, gave her courage. "She was speaking about my place here," Elena said softly. "And about my child." A murmur spread through the crowd. Veronica scoffed lightly. "I was only being honest." "Surely honesty isn't a crime." The father-in-law nodded slowly. "Honesty is valuable," he said. "But cruelty disguised as honesty is still cruelty." Veronica's eyes flashed. "With respect, I don't see how this concerns you. This is between Adrian and me." Adrian stiffened. "Veronica, enough," his father said quietly. The single word silenced them both. He turned to Adrian then, disappointment heavy in his eyes. "Is this how you honor your wife?" he asked. "By allowing her to be humiliated under your roof?" Adrian's face flushed. "I didn't think." "Exactly," his father said. "You didn't." Veronica stepped forward, voice sharp now. "Let's not pretend she's innocent. She only has this position because of you. Without this family, she would have nothing." The room held its breath. The father-in-law's lips curved, not into a smile, but into something far more dangerous. "Nothing," he repeated, he took a step closer to Veronica. You seem very certain of who owns what in this house. Veronica lifted her chin. Everyone knows this mansion belongs to Adrian. To our family. Yes, he said calmly. Our family. He turned, gesturing broadly at the walls, the chandeliers, the art. This estate has been in my care for decades. Built with wealth earned through discipline, sacrifice, and legacy. Veronica nodded eagerly. Exactly. But care and ownership, he continued, are not the same. The guests leaned and unconsciously he reached into his jacket pocket and removed a slim leather folder. The sound of it opening echoed louder than it should have. I had hoped to wait, he said, almost to himself. But arrogance has a way of rushing things. Veronica's smile faltered as he looked at Elena again. You trusted me, he said gently, and I will not let that trust be broken. Adrian's confusion deepened. Father, what are you talking about? The older man straightened, his voice now carrying unmistakable authority. Tonight, he announced, seems as good a time as any for clarity. Veronica laughed nervously. You're being dramatic. He ignored her. This mansion, he said, tapping the folder. The holdings, the accounts, the shares, everything you see around you, a pause, were transferred years ago. The room froze as Adrian's eyes widened. Transferred to who? The father-in-law's gaze settled firmly on Elena. To her. Gasps erupted across the hall as Veronica's face drained of color. Elena stared at him, stunned, her breath caught somewhere between disbelief and fear. To protect her, he continued, and her child. Long before tonight, silence fell like a verdict, and the world Veronica thought she owned began to crack. The silence that followed was so complete it felt unreal, as though the entire room had been swallowed by a single held breath. Veronica's mouth opened slightly, then closed again, her thoughts scrambling to catch up with the words that had just shattered her certainty. Around her, guests exchanged stunned glances, some covering their mouths, others staring openly at Elena, as if seeing her for the first time. Elena's hands trembled in her lap. That can't be right, she whispered, her voice barely audible even to herself. No one told me. The father-in-law leaned closer, his voice low and steady. Because it was meant to be safe, he said. Safe from manipulation. Safe from greed. Safe until you needed it. Adrian took a step back, as if the floor had shifted beneath him. You transferred everything without telling me. I transferred ownership, his father corrected. Not responsibility. You were never ready for either. Veronica let out a sharp laugh, brittle and forced. This is ridiculous, she said loudly. You expect us to believe that she gestured dismissively toward Elena, owns all of this? Yes, he replied simply. Her laughter stopped. But she's done nothing, Veronica protested. She doesn't run businesses. She doesn't attend meetings. She barely speaks. The father-in-law's gaze hardened. Power is not measured by noise, he said, and dignity does not require an audience. A ripple of approval moved through the room. Veronica turned to Adrian desperately. You knew about this, didn't you? Tell them you knew. Adrian's silence was answer enough. She looked back at Elena, her voice lowering, venomous. So this was your plan? Pretend to be weak while you sit on everything. Elena finally found her voice. I never wanted this, she said softly. I only wanted a family. The words struck harder than any accusation. The father-in-law placed a protective hand on Elena's shoulder. And that, he said, is why you were chosen. Veronica shook her head, backing away slightly. This can be reversed, she insisted. You can't just give away an empire. It was never given, he replied. It was entrusted. He turned to the guests. Many of you have done business with us for years, he said. You understand that trust is the foundation of wealth. Without it, money is nothing but paper. Several men nodded slowly as Veronica's eyes darted around the room, searching for allies, but found only curiosity and judgment. The admiration she had enjoyed earlier had evaporated, replaced by quiet scrutiny. This is humiliating, she hissed. You're doing this to punish me. No, the father-in-law said calmly. You humiliated yourself. Adrian finally stepped forward. Father, he said, his voice cracking. If this is true, where does that leave me? The older man studied his son for a long moment, sadness flickering beneath his stern exterior. It leaves you with a choice, he said. One you should have made long ago. Veronica grabbed Adrian's arm. Don't let them turn you against me, she pleaded. We can still fix this. Adrian looked at her hand on his sleeve, then at Elena, sitting quietly, eyes lowered, protecting the life inside her despite everything. Slowly, he pulled his arm free. Veronica's breath hitched. The father-in-law opened the folder and removed several documents, holding them up for all to see. The transfer was completed legally and irrevocably, he said. Every property, every account, every share now answers to Elena. He placed the folder gently in Elena's hands. She stared at it, overwhelmed. I don't know how to manage any of this. You will learn, he said, and you will not be alone. Veronica's voice rose suddenly, sharp and desperate. This child, she said, pointing at Elena's belly. That's why you did this, isn't it? Yes, he replied without hesitation. Because that child represents the future of this family. Veronica's face twisted. And what am I then? He met her gaze steadily. A lesson. The word cut deep. Tears welled in Veronica's eyes, but anger burned hotter. You think money makes her powerful? She snapped. She'll crumble without you. Elena looked up then, her eyes steady for the first time that night. I've already endured more than you know, she said quietly. And I'm still standing. The room seemed to lean toward her, drawn by the quiet strength in her voice. The father-in-law nodded. That, he said, is real wealth. Veronica took another step back, the room no longer hers. The chandeliers no longer shone for her. The whispers now followed her, not Elena. And the truth, once revealed, could never be buried again. The shift in the room was unmistakable, like a crown quietly changing heads. Where Veronica once stood surrounded by admiration, there was now distance. People who had laughed at her jokes moments earlier avoided her eyes, suddenly fascinated by their glasses, their phones, the walls. Power had a gravity of its own, and it had moved. Elena felt it too, though she barely understood it. The leather folder rested on her lap like something alive, heavy with responsibility and revelation. She inhaled slowly, steadying herself, aware of every heartbeat, every movement of the child within her. This life, this future, was no longer fragile. It was protected. Veronica broke the silence with a sharp, brittle sound that might once have been laughter. So this is it, she said. Years of loyalty, of sacrifice, erased with a few signatures? The father-in-law looked at her without malice. Loyalty that humiliates others is not loyalty, he replied. And sacrifice made for status is simply ambition. She turned to Elena, her eyes blazing. You think they respect you now? They're only afraid. Elena rose slowly from her chair. The movement drew every gaze, not because it was dramatic, but because it was calm. She stood tall, one hand resting on her belly, the other holding the folder. Maybe, Elena said softly. But fear fades. Respect grows. Veronica sneered. You'll ruin everything. This world will eat you alive. Then it will have to try. Elena answered. The quiet murmur of approval rippled through the guests. Adrian stood frozen between them, the weight of his choices pressing down on him at last. Elena, he began, his voice thick with regret. I never meant for any of this to happen. She looked at him then, not with anger, but with clarity. Intent doesn't erase impact, she said. And silence can be just as cruel as betrayal. The word struck him harder than any accusation. His shoulders sagged. The father-in-law turned to his son. You will leave this house tonight, he said evenly. Not as punishment, but as reflection, until you understand what you nearly destroyed. Adrian nodded, unable to meet Elena's eyes. That Veronica's composure cracked completely. You can't do this to me, she cried. I belong here. The father-in-law's voice was firm. Belonging is not claimed. It is earned. Two security staff appeared discreetly at the edge of the room, not aggressive, merely present. Veronica looked around, searching desperately for someone, anyone, to defend her. No one moved. Her gaze returned to Elena, hatred and disbelief tangled together. Enjoy it while it lasts, she spat. This power will change you. Elena held her gaze steadily. It already has, she said. It taught me who I don't want to become. Veronica laughed once more, hollow and defeated, then turned away as the staff guided her toward the exit. The sound of her heels echoed sharply, then faded, swallowed by the mansion that had rejected her. The collective exhale filled the room. The father-in-law addressed the guests once more. This evening was meant to celebrate family, he said. Let it now remind us what family truly means. One by one, people nodded, some approaching Elena with newfound respect, others with quiet apologies in their eyes. The air felt lighter, as though a storm had passed. Elena felt tears sting her eyes, not of humiliation this time, but release. The father-in-law leaned toward her. "You did well," he said softly. "Your strength was always there." She nodded, emotion tightening her throat. "I was just afraid to use it." He smiled gently. "Fear is natural. Courage is choosing to stand anyway." Elena glanced around the room, at the mansion she now owned, at the people who now saw her, at the future unfolding before her. For the first time, she did not feel like a guest in her own life. And as the music slowly resumed, softer and more deliberate, the celebration transformed, not of wealth or status, but of truth reclaimed. The music drifted through the hall again, slower now, stripped of its earlier arrogance, as if the mansion itself had learned humility. Guests spoke in hushed tones, their laughter cautious, respectful. The night had changed direction, and everyone felt it. What had begun as a display of wealth had become something far more uncomfortable and far more real. Elena stood near the tall windows overlooking the gardens, watching the lights shimmer across the fountains. Her reflection stared back at her, unfamiliar yet steady. For years, she had learned how to shrink herself, how to survive by staying quiet. Tonight, that version of her felt distant. The father-in-law joined her, standing beside her without ceremony. "This house has seen many celebrations," he said. "Few moments of truth." Elena nodded. "I never wanted to expose anyone." "I know," he replied. "That's why it had to be done for you." Behind them, Adrian approached slowly, hesitation in every step. He stopped a few feet away, hands clenched at his sides. "Elena," he said, his voice barely holding together. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I need to say this." She turned to face him, calm but guarded. "I was weak," he continued. "I let admiration turn into temptation, and temptation into betrayal. I convinced myself it didn't matter because you were strong enough to endure it." Elena's gaze softened, but only slightly. "Strength isn't an invitation to be hurt," she said. "It's something people respect, or they lose the right to stand beside you." Adrian lowered his head. "I understand now." "Understanding comes late," she replied. "But it still matters." The father-in-law stepped forward. "Your future is your own to repair," he said to his son. "But hers, and the child's, comes first." Adrian nodded, accepting the truth without argument. "I'll leave tonight," he said, "and I'll do whatever it takes to become someone worthy, even if that day never comes." Elena placed a hand over her belly, feeling a gentle movement. "That's between you and time," she said. Adrian looked at her one last time, regret written deeply across his face, then turned and walked away, disappearing down the long corridor that had once felt like his inheritance. The guests began to depart soon after, offering polite farewells, respectful bows of the head, promises of future meetings now addressed to Elena. Each goodbye reinforced the new reality. When the hall finally emptied, the mansion grew quiet. Elena remained standing in the center of it all, the silence no longer intimidating. It felt earned. The father-in-law watched her with pride. "Power doesn't announce itself," he said. "It reveals itself when tested." She smiled faintly. "I'm still afraid." He nodded. "Good. Fear keeps us human." Weeks later, the mansion felt different. Lighter. Elena walked its halls in the early mornings, sunlight spilling through tall windows, her steps unhurried. Decisions were made thoughtfully. Staff spoke to her with warmth, not fear. Her voice, once uncertain, now carried purpose. She transformed the grand house into a home. Not louder, but kindred on a quiet afternoon. She stood in the nursery, sunlight brushing the walls, imagining the life about to begin. She placed the folder of documents into a drawer and closed it gently. They no longer defined her. What defined her was choice. Choice to protect. Choice to lead. Choice to break a cycle that had mistaken cruelty for power. And somewhere far from the mansion, the echoes of arrogance faded, while dignity, quiet, unyielding, took its place. The story ended not with revenge, but with truth, and that truth was enough.